I'm Kristi, as you know, and I've started a company called the Stress Less Club. But to understand how it's got to this, I thought I had to start from the beginning of my journey. So I was actually working in law until January last year, and I was on the vacation scheme years ago. I must have been 20 years old, and one of the partners asked us to write down three things. So he asked us to write down where we were going, how we were going to get there, and what was important to us. So at that stage, I was in my second year studying law at the University of Sheffield. I wanted to get a training contract, had all these big dreams. So I wrote down, I'm going to become a commercial lawyer working for a global law firm by the time I'm 25. I'm going to get there by working hard, overcoming challenges, but maintaining a balance in my life so I can enjoy the things I love. What is important to me is being successful. So, young me had all these big dreams. I love how I also started to write, I hope, and then I crossed it out and I put, I am going. So, there was obviously some manifestation going on there. And I also went back and added the happy because commercial lawyer just wasn't enough. So yeah, that's what I wrote. We all had this task given to us, and I did it. So by the age of 25, I was working for DLA. I qualified into the corporate team here in Sheffield. And I thought I'd made it. I had all these goals that younger me dreamed of. And on paper, everything that you thought you might want at that age. Had the house, relationship, the job, good friends. But over time, my mental health started to deteriorate, and I really started to struggle with how I felt about myself. So, on top of being stressed and anxious, I was constantly chasing for things outside of myself, never letting myself relax. I had a lot of negative self-talk, and I developed some really unhealthy habits. So I guess you could say I was having a bit of a quarter life crisis. So I started to go on this self-help journey. I started reading about how to improve my mental health in my spare time. I started going to events that were focused around well-being in law. And then I started sharing my journey on LinkedIn, on TikTok. So this was one of my posts where I would always try and post thing around the Mental Health Awareness Week or Mindfulness Month. And then I just won't post for months on end. But this was one of the posts that I did a few years ago. But I couldn't believe how many people resonated with me. So there were some partners who I'd worked with for years and when I said hello to, I'd done work with, but they I'd never had any idea that they'd actually struggled with the mental health. So it just made me realize how many people struggle with it, but you would never know if you were just coming into daily like interactions with them. And I think one person shares their journey, it just opens up space for other people too as well. So I had this idea around starting a community focused on stressing less and just providing support for people that are in high pressure environments like law, just so people feel less alone because I think I felt quite alone when I was struggling and I didn't really know where to turn. So I had these ideas and I sent these texts to my mum and sister. So this was the 3rd of September 2023. At that time, I was I'd been qualified about a year and a half at that point, I think, and I was really stressed out and just wanting to do something else. But unfortunately, I had so many deals on, and everyone knows that law is not a 9 to 5, so I just didn't have the energy to start it. So the Stress Less Club never happened. But then January last year, I left law. I'd been thinking about it for a while. I think deep down, I knew that I wanted to be learning about mental health, the mindset. I didn't want to be learning about the Companies Act. So it got to the point where, again, my mental health was, I was kind of in and out with my mental health. It was good and then it was bad. And I just thought I need to do this for myself. So I handed my notice in. I booked a flight to Bali and I booked onto a yoga course. And at that point, the plan was to go and do freelance law, maybe do something to do with wellness on the side. But I absolutely loved teaching yoga. It was like everything I'd learned through my self-help journey were rooted in yoga principles. And up to that point in my life, I'd been living in a very much survival mode of pushing and always striving for more money, I guess more status, and always wanting to chase things. And then yoga just taught me the complete opposite of that, learning how to listen to your body, slow down. And I loved all of the philosophy behind it. And it really helped me improve my mental health and kind of come out the other side because up to that point, I'd walked away from this amazing career that I thought I once wanted. I was unemployed and feeling like a bit of a failure. And then I was in Bali learning all these things, and I thought, no, actually, maybe I can do something with this. I know that some people think yoga is not for them, but it's so much more than just the flexibility or the doing the intense hot style yoga. It's just about that relationship with yourself as well. So the Stress Less Club idea came back because when I was thinking about it all in 2023, I wasn't really sure how it would materialize. So I thought, well, actually, yoga just helped me with my stress and definitely think it can help other people. So earlier this year, I decided to launch it, and we've been doing individual events. So putting tickets on similar to what the ladies in law do, and then individual customers will buy them and come along. And we've been doing yoga brunches. We've had a women's health brunch. We had a clinical psychologist come in for Mental Health Awareness Month. We've done a run club. So it's about getting people together and hopefully walking away a little less stressed or trying something new. And we always have a bit of an interactive session or a talk so that people feel like they've learned something as well. And then in May, I started doing company events as well, because that was always the goal, really. I really wanted to help people that were like where I was a few years ago when I was struggling. So, corporate events, I actually went to my old law firm, DLA, which is a full circle moment, and did a similar session to what I'm doing for you guys today. We did the yoga and then we had a bit of a talk after. And the whole point of the Stress Less Club is redefining well-being from the inside out. You will hear a lot about well-being, the wellness trend at the minute. It's everywhere. It's over everyone's Instagrams, TikTok, the news. Everyone has become obsessed with wellness. And I was a bit obsessed with it a few years ago. I think I was always trying to get my steps in, eat healthy, be amazing at my job. And it just gets to that point where it's really unhealthy. So the whole point of redefining well-being from the inside out is that no matter what you have on paper, you might have an amazing job, relationships, you might be able to buy whatever you want, but unless you feel good in yourself, then there's no point to it all. So, and that's something I really struggled with. So I had to rebuild that relationship with myself and start speaking to myself more positively, not always beating myself up and putting pressure on myself to do more. So that is what the Stress Less Club is about. And it's really important for people in law in particular because it is quite I wouldn't say it's kind of a career where if you are in this kind of role, you are constantly spotting risks for clients. I mean, I spent 6 months I did construction, litigation, corporate, and then I did a secondment for my training contract. And the majority of those seats, you are managing these risks for clients. And time again, situations will come up where you are reminded of the gravity of the risks involved in law. And if you are constantly having that put in your mind about the risks of, say, if you get something wrong, or if you're doing a due diligence task and this employee liability if you don't draft the contract right. So I think that's something that really made me extra vigilant and worry a lot more, and which is one of the reasons why I think this work is so important for people in these kind of industries where you are seeing these big issues come up time and time and again. Um, so yeah, so I feel like I've covered a little bit about that, but it is also about understanding your nervous system. So I'll come on to that in a second. Um, but yeah, just feeling calmer in your body and then building the healthier habits as well. And this is just some stats. So if anyone, I'm sure you might be aware of the charity Law Care. So they do a Life in the Law report. So if you are ever struggling with your mental health and you need someone to speak to, they have a helpline, which I've heard amazing things about. They do a lot of events on how to manage stress, and some of the articles I found extremely helpful. So they did a report, this was 2025, and nearly 60% reported poor mental well-being. Half of them reported anxiety often, very often, or all of the time. 32% not likely to recommend law as a career, and a majority said they could see themselves leaving in the next 5 years. So it just goes to show how much this work is needed to make sure that law is a sustainable career, and which is why I'm so passionate about it, because I want people to I don't want people to think that you can't have a sustainable career in law. I think with the right tools, you definitely can. So coming on to the science of stress. So the easiest way to think about it is two pedals in the car. So you have your gas, your accelerator, and then you have your brake. And when we were back in our hunter-gatherer days, we would have a fight or flight reaction. Say if there was another wild animal trying to kill us, immediately our stress response would get triggered. So it's designed to keep us alive. And that is okay when you are experiencing a healthy amount of stress. But the problem is when it's become excessive. So the problem with today's stresses are this fight or flight can just get triggered by the smallest amount of stress. So, for example, you might get an email out of the blue from your manager, or a client might call you out on a call. And I don't know if anyone else feels it, but you get that, your heart starts racing quickly. Um, and it's that fight or flight response that your body is going under. And it can happen in other situations as well. You know, if someone cuts you up in traffic, that's another one. So in the past, that was great because it helped keep us alive. It helped prepare us for fight. But the problem is that a lot of us were undergoing this fight or flight regularly. And that was something that was happening with me. And I could really feel the effects of that from my heart rate, my anxiety. So just going on to the fight or flight response. So how it works is there's a trigger, so perceived threat or stressful situation occurs. So for in that example I just said, you might be on a call, client calls you out, you think you've done something wrong, your heart rate starts increasing, because your brain has just detected danger. And then all these things happen in the body. So your adrenaline, cortisol's released, basically stress hormones are released into your bloodstream. And then your body prepares for action. So it gears up to fight, flee, or protect. So if you have a deadline at work and you're in the office with a few colleagues and you find out you've got this deadline, you're all in it together, you might feel that adrenaline going. It's not like overly stressful. that is a good amount of stress, right? You're there, you're in it together, you get it done, you might clock off at 10 o'clock, but then you go to bed, you sleep, you wake up the next day, hopefully. That's the ideal situation. But the problem is that not that doesn't always happen. And it's this constant stress that will cause a complete fatigue on your body. So not only is it the heart rate that gets increased, it's also your faster breathing, muscle tension, because your muscles are preparing to fight. So I noticed it a lot where I was clenching my tummy, sat at my desk, or my jaw. A lot of people struggle with that. They might have jaw ache. And it's just because of this fight or flight response that is built in you for survival. And then also racing thoughts, your mind will just go on to overdrive because it's trying to stay alert. So that is the accelerator. That is our fight or flight. And then the opposite of that is our rest and digest. The only way to get into our rest and digest is through activating our parasympathetic nervous system. And if you are healthy and your nervous system is balanced, you will just toggle between the two. So the way this happens is, say we've done the late night in the office. We've got the deadline submitted. And then we shut the laptop, we drive home. Brain thinks we're safe. We get in bed, we've done our skincare, we've brushed our teeth, everything's sorted. We're getting in bed, we're gonna relax. So then your brain's going into recovery mode. Your nervous system can calm down. Your parasympathetic nervous system's activated. So your body starts to go into this rest and restore. That's great, but the problem is if you've been going through a lot of stress at work and your mind just can't shut off, you might then get in bed at night and you just cannot stop the thoughts. You might not be able to calm down. You might struggle with sleep. So, one of the easiest ways to do this, to activate your rest and digest, is by breathing. So, the belly breathing that we did at the start of the yoga class, yoga from stretching. And what this does is when you breathe for long, exhale for longer than you inhale, you are sending a message to the brain that you're safe. So you're almost tricking the brain. And what this does is it slows the heart rate down. It allows for deeper breathing. It allows your muscles to relax. So I've already kind of touched on this, but the problem is that a lot of us aren't getting enough time in that rest and digest state because the stress has become constant. And this is just a good way. We'll send out the slides after, but you can see how the cycle works. And if we are stuck in survival mode, we can have all sorts of problems. So yeah, mind's always on, poor sleep, tension in the body. And it can even make us forget things. So I had this quite a lot where I had to write everything down because my thinking brain was just offline because I was stressed so much. So if you feel sometimes that you just kind of forget things or you really struggle to think logically, it is a sign of maybe your brain is in that high stress state. So I did just touch on this, but what happens when we move with the breath is that we are slowing down the exhale and we're breathing into our belly. So that helps stimulate a nerve that runs from the back of our neck all the way to the bottom of the spine. And just breathing like that is sending a signal to our brain that we are rested. Even if you don't feel rested, but you can just make these movements with your body by moving into your belly with the breath. And then over time, you can then start to shift your attention away from your mind and what's going on there and back into the body. But it does take practice, as I've wrote there. So it's not like you will be able to say if you've never done yoga before or you've never done any breath work and then you start trying to do it and you're like, oh, I'm not very good at that. Like my mind's just going elsewhere. That is so normal. It's the easiest way to compare it to is you wouldn't just walk into a gym and start weightlifting and start lifting like 100 kg. And it's the same with like meditation and breathing. A lot of people think it's not for them because they do struggle, but it's so hard to be present and not distracted in today's world. So if you do feel like you try it and your mind starts to go elsewhere, that is the whole point. We're just training our brain to come back to our present moment and to our bodies. And then it also releases stored tension. So a lot of us hold a lot of tension in our shoulders, our necks, our hips. So one of the things I touched on earlier was my belly. So I was really tensing my belly. And then because I was tensing my belly, it was coming back to that stress cycle where my body thought I was stressed. And then it was sending a signal to the brain that I was stressed. So little things like relaxing your shoulders away from your ears, unclenching the jaw can just help come out of that stress response state. Other ways to reduce stress is spending time in nature, just getting outside without your phone. I know it's hard. I think I used to be obsessed with listening to podcasts. And now, like the first few times I did it where I left my phone at home, it felt so uncomfortable. But now I couldn't do that. I couldn't listen to a podcast and walk. I think I'd be too overstimulated. And it's just crazy how doing it for the last year has really made me become more present and enjoy my time outside. Cold water exposure. So when you put yourself in cold water, it activates the vagus nerve that we spoke about earlier that runs from the back of the neck. I know a lot of people don't like doing that, but it's just an option if anyone is wanting to try something new. Humming and singing. So if you're just driving, just blasting music in your car, singing is always a good one because you're activating the vagus nerve again. Meditation and mindfulness. So just being aware of your surroundings, I think you can easily just go on a walk and be listening to a podcast or be in your head thinking about things, which is what I still struggle with. I've still have stresses. It's not that I'm living a completely stress-free life. One of the best advices I got from like an old therapist was the 5 4 3 2 1 rule. So saying if you're on a walk and you're in your head a bit, or if you're in the car and your mind's starting to go elsewhere, just noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can smell or taste. And it really just engages your senses. And now I find it quite a fun thing to do when I'll do it on my little walks, just to become more mindful of what's going on in my surroundings. Social connection. I think when you are struggling with your mental health or you have got a lot on with work or uni, the last thing you want to do is see your friends. But if you become isolated, it makes it worse. So just sometimes forcing yourself to do something. And even if you say to a friend or a partner, look, I'm feeling this way. Can we just do something that's low effort? You could just go to the cinema where you don't have to talk, but just having that connection where you're close to someone and just not isolating yourself is something that can really help the nervous system. Sleep, that is a crucial one. I know it's always hard when you have deadlines and a lot of work, and I feel like sleep always ends up being the thing that we kind of cut down, but it's so important for our rest and our recovery and just processing what's happened in the day. So that is a really big one. Regular movement and exercise. Oh, and then I actually can't see the last two because of my. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so reducing screen time. So I got really addicted to scrolling, and it's one of the worst things for your mental health. So now I've got an app called Opal, and it's changed my life. So every time I try and scroll, I have to go on an app and I have to press a timer, because when it gets to the point where you've done it that much, it's almost just like a automatic response. You open your phone and you just go on TikTok or whatever. So I recommend everyone at all my events to do this, because a lot of the things people are saying when we always do like a reflective exercise about stressing less, and it is always the screen time. So definitely, if that's something you struggle with, because these apps are actually designed to be addictive, I should say as well. The people that design them, they don't even let the kids have them. So yeah. And then avoiding eating lunch at the desk, just because you are not be able to digest your food properly. And you can struggle with side effects like bloating, things like that, by trying to focus on too much at once. So I always like to say a few small things because I think it's really hard when you've got a busy life and you've got a lot going on to go and take an hour out to do yoga or go on a walk in nature. So I think just thinking of the small moments every day, if there's any micro stresses that you can eliminate. So maybe it's going on your phone first thing in the morning. Can you just delay it 15 minutes? Relaxing your muscles, when you're sat at your desk, can you relax them away from your ears? Just breathing into your belly like we did at the start. Going on breaks without your phone. We said about the phone for 15 minutes. And just being kinder to yourself, noticing when you're starting to speak to yourself negatively and just replacing it with positive ones. You're all doing something to do with your degree. You've all taken the time out to come on this call. That's amazing. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. And giving yourself permission to relax, which is why the last few minutes of the yoga session called Shavasana is so important because it's trying to train your body that you are allowed to slow down, which is something a lot of people struggle with. So I went back to what I wrote in my diary when I was 20 years old. And then, because it's completely different, what was once important to me was obviously success, but that was at the cost of my mental health. So now, if I was to rewrite it, I've started to redefine it as feeling safe. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping others feel the same through yoga and through breath work. Thank you so much. I always like to finish with a reflective exercise. So I'll throw the question out there and you can either write in the chat or it's something just to take away if you want to have a think about it. So just think about one thing that would help you stress less. So it could be downloading the app to stop you from scrolling for the first 15 minutes. It could be getting outside on your lunch break. So, yeah. And if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free. You can always reach out. My LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook is there, and my email is there. Thank you so much.
Kristi, can I just say a massive thank you? I think that was so helpful. I do all the things wrong. So I was going through it going, wow, that was incredible.
Oh, no,
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you so, so much. It was incredible. And you can already see, look, all of the gorgeous love hearts that we get from people that watch. And everybody, we will be circulating the slides after this, and do feel free to reach out to the incredible Kristi. And it may be that you see us duetting again at some point, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be amazing. And thank you so much, everyone.